I think it can be, but in the case of making it popular, there's always going to be kind of an aesthetic wall that you're going to hit. You know, and it's the same reason why people like to go to, like, millions of people like to go to a Marvel movie in the theaters, and why, you know, you have a much smaller audience for, you know, an art house film or something. So, in the case of whether new music should be kind of supported and, you know, financially supported, I think yes, absolutely. Just simply because we don't know the kind of people who are going to like what we're doing, right? It could be anybody. So we have to create opportunities where our music is being, I don't know if you want to use the term propagated, but we have to, you know, create opportunities where our music is put out there on I would say, a large scale. Because, you know, somebody could listen to what we're doing and have their entire life change, right? And we have to believe in this ourselves, right? Otherwise, why do it? So I think in that case, we have to kind of not be put down by the fact that our audiences typically are smaller, and that we should be guided by the fact that our music deserves to be listened to. Quite a bit, I would say. I spent a lot of time in academia, and I think the best part about it is that you get to meet a lot of people, and you know, I think a lot of people form the foundations of their lives in schools and in the academy, so to say, and they really build the next part of their lives. You know, they meet other composers, for example, and they start ensembles or collectives or whatever. But also, you know, the teachers are really important too. Just being able to learn from somebody as much as you possibly can. And you know, I'm one of those composers that really appreciates my academic training. Although I'm realizing over the years that so much of what composing is an intuitive process, and so, you know, the academic training can only really bring you so far, and the rest is just sort of working out your own headspace, I guess. But also, I've realized over the years that the academic training can come back in kind of strange, unusual ways. I took a course on Schenkerian Analysis, and funny enough, that method has popped up in very strange ways in my music. Just learning about kind of the multiple layers of tonal tension in a piece. You have the very low layer, middle layer, and then the upper layers. You know, as my music becomes increasingly sort of melody based, that funny enough, the Schenkerian Analysis kind of popped up again. How, you know, the tension of a piece kind of eventually resolves, but all layers have to kind of meet at the same point, and so you have kind of these different unveiling layers of tension. And funny enough, as a younger composer, I had a lot of trouble with this, like sort of maintaining tension over long periods of time, right? You know, when you're a young composer, it's easy to write very short pieces, but eventually you start thinking larger and larger, and so you have to begin to think about kind of these monumental ideas and concepts. And so, funny enough, the Schenkerian Analysis course completely opened this kind of world to me. No.
Okay.
I think it's all sort of one indistinguishable process, logic and intuition. And I've really made no attempt to separate them. In fact, I think it's, if you're honest, if I'm honest, I should say, I don't think there's any separation between the two. Although, when I say intuition, I mean, I kind of use this metaphor frequently that if you're a person on a planet and your academic training is you sort of voyaging throughout the planet, and eventually you get to a point where you've seen the entire planet. So what do? Well, you build a spaceship and you go into outer space, right? And so eventually you get to this point where you're exploring kind of outer space, right? And so I think that's kind of what I mean by intuition, is you're just kind of voyaging into the void a little bit. And so you've acquired all these tools while you were on the planet, and now it's your job to kind of construct something that perhaps is far away from the planet, or perhaps you're orbiting the planet, so maybe you're a bit closer to the tradition you've grown up with. But yeah, I mean, in my opinion, like when we're talking about logic in music, well, the most logical solution is the best notes you can write, right? So wherever those notes come from, it doesn't really matter whether it's intuitive or a logical extension of what you've already written. It doesn't matter, because the most logical step is the step that works the best, right? So yeah, and I can't remember who said this. Maybe it was but maybe it was, I can't remember who said it, but they said that the very first notes you write down as a composer, even if you're a kid, the rest of your life is really just about sort of capturing that fascination with creation, that same fascination you had as a kid. And so really, throughout your entire life, you're just sort of kind of rediscovering yourself. You're revealing more about yourself. Yeah, and I've heard this kind of metaphor about art that, like, art, the work that you're making is a big hunk of clay, and then your job is really just to uncover the form in the clay, right? And so the form, the finished piece is in the clay already. It already exists. And so your job is just to get rid of all the stuff that doesn't belong, right? And I sort of have a bit of trouble with that analogy, but actually, yeah, I mean, I like it, yeah. I think there's probably two things, and maybe three, and they tend to be fairly generic statements, but ones that have kind of stuck with me over the years. And the first mentor I really had with composition, we were kind of finishing up the school year, and he said to me, "Tyler, write whatever you want, but make it beautiful." And over my life, I've kind of that has stuck with me for some reason, even though a lot of the music I've written is not beautiful. But yeah, that's always been kind of a central piece of advice that's been given to me. The other one, kind of going back to what I said about saying something, something that Norbert Palle kind of said to me, just say what you want to say. Don't stammer or babble, or don't write music that's made to impress other people. Just say something strongly, and that could be interpreted, I think, in a lot of different ways, but also something that's really stuck with me over the years. And the third piece of advice was actually not given to me but by somebody who met Stockhausen, just in I think a meet and greet or something. And this young composer went up to Stockhausen and said, "Oh, I'm a young composer, and I write music." And the only thing Stockhausen said to this young composer was, "Don't give up." And that might be the most important piece of advice. If I had to give some advice to young composers, and I feel kind of funny saying it because I'm still pretty young myself, but I would say what's important to realize is that as a composer of classical music, you sacrifice a lot for your artistic autonomy. You pay a lot of music to go to school to study music. The music you write will probably never be popular. The music you will write will probably, the audience will always be quite small, right? But in some ways, that's a huge blessing, because you are subservient to almost nobody. You're almost sort of completely artistically autonomous, and as I mentioned, you sacrifice a lot for that, but really embrace it. So be extravagant. Don't be afraid to be pretentious. Don't be afraid to be shocking, or to do things that you think will perhaps not be well received. So yeah, and I also, in a funny way, I also recommend doing things in the opposite way. Write music for children. Write music for amateur choirs. Write something simple. Write something that's just beautiful for the sake of being beautiful. Study folk music, I would say. Whatever, of music of your own nation, or music of something that interests you. And don't be afraid to be intellectual. I would say, because I think there is sort of a anti-intellectual current in contemporary classical music in North America, unfortunately. So really don't be afraid to kind of take advantage of the freedom you have, because a lot of people who make music, they don't have the freedom that we have as composers. We only answer to ourselves, really.
Yeah.
So it's really a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Because it's music that has always existed. So when you study music, you are getting basically to the primordial core of artistic expression, I would say. And the nice thing about folk music is that it feels like nobody owns it. That it's, except for the nation that produced it, perhaps. But it feels like it belongs to everybody in that sort of fashion, right? So when you sing a folk song, you're singing a song that belongs to everybody, and you can sort of think of being part of maybe a collective soul or something. But for me, along with many other composers, Bartók and Stravinsky and De Falla and people like that, there's they also realized kind of the same thing, that there was something extremely important about learning music, studying folk music, integrating it into their own artistic practice. I am a composer who writes music for classical instruments. I also perform. I also conduct. I also teach, and I also curate. So I'm a composer who does a few other things.